Now, let's talk about the copy elements that you can use to write better copy faster. This is Roy Furr, and you are back for your next lesson in high velocity copywriting. And that's right, we're going to look at copy elements. These are the plug and play elements that can be included in almost any sales copy. Wherever you feel fit to put them in, they can make a difference in the persuasive power of your messaging. And that might not be clear at first, so let's dive in and let's talk about what these are and where you might be able to use them based on just conveying the right message. So first and foremost is a without list. Well, I don't know if this is foremost, but it's really useful and I really like it. And I've kind of alluded to it earlier in the training that your prospect is coming into your situation, coming into the promise that you're going to make in the middle of your promotion with some kind of preconceptions about the result that you're going to promise. So a really common and useful example to think about this is weight loss. So people who have tried to lose weight, who have been a buyer in the weight loss market before, have tried all sorts of different diets. They've tried exercise plans. They've tried pills that made them feel sick. They have tried everything. And so if you have a new diet product, you may need to specifically address how they are able to lose weight without all of those things that they've tried, that they failed, that they didn't like, those things that were all the negative downsides of the products or services that they've used before that have tried to fulfill on the same fundamental promise that you are making. So having a without list allows you to make a promise that becomes more interesting because you are immediately eliminating all of those objections. And very similarly is a what it's not list. And this is, you have tried generating more traffic for your website. And I'm going to teach you how to generate more traffic for your website. But I'll tell you what, this is not SEO. This is not Google AdWords. This isn't Facebook. It's not this. It's not that. And by labeling all the things that it's not, that maybe they've tried before, that they haven't had a lot of success with, they become more and more curious about what it is in particular that you offer. So without and what it's not are very similar negative lists that help you establish the context of the promise in the broader marketplace. And the important thing to note about both of these is that a buyer is a buyer is a buyer is a buyer, meaning it's much easier to sell someone who is already in your market a new product or service in that market than it is to sell to someone who is outside of the market. So if someone's like let's say an investment newsletter subscriber, they're way more likely to buy another investment newsletter than, someone who's never even heard of the investment newsletter industry. And the challenge that you have in selling to that person is that they are a more sophisticated customer, and you need to specifically address the different issues that they didn't like about what's out there before. This is where some of your market research comes in handy. If you recognize that the top, 10, 20, 30 books on Amazon are about a small set of topics or subtopics around your topic, and you're doing something different, then listing all of those subtopics as things that it's not, or listing all of their promises as, how to get this without that, or all the downsides that came up as you were going through the Amazon reviews for the various products. So, if somebody is trying to lose weight, they may hate exercise. And if your particular product does not emphasize exercise, you can talk about, without strenuous exercise and spending hours at the gym. Or, this isn't yet another exercise protocol that's going to work your butt off just to shed, a pound or two that's going to come back as soon as you stop working out like a mad person. So by addressing the objections that way, you are better able to position your promise in a crowded marketplace. And then here are a whole bunch of objections. And This is actually the at one point early on, as we were talking about developing your message and how that would help you uh, write better copy faster, what you recognize is that there are a lot of objections that you may have to address. There are limiting beliefs that you may have to address. And by making sure that you cover those in your copy, you're going to write better copy. And by planning them out, you're going to write better copy faster, which is the whole premise of this program, right? So when we're talking about objections, there's a couple ways to do it, and then we'll get to a specific list. So you can be overt about it. You can have frequently asked questions. And in some cases, like if you're selling an event, for example, handling the logistics of somebody showing up at an event is an objection that needs to be overcome. It may be more of a point of a confusion than an objection, but it is an objection that you have to overcome, that they're going to be able to get to the event. And so things like that may work well as an overt frequently asked questions section, but really good salespeople actually build objections into the copy. And so if you are looking to address objections in your copy, what you want to do is you want to consider what those objections are and see if you can head them off as early as possible in the process. I was just reviewing a piece of copy that I did for a client, and what I noticed as I went through it is, for example, this was about a particular method of picking stocks that were more buy and hold investments, but based on the track record of this particular person for picking stocks, a lot of these stocks had taken off into the multiple hundreds of percents, and some of them beyond 1,000%. And what was unique and interesting about this is that he was largely buying and holding stocks for a few years. And one of the big objections that might come up is if you're looking at gains percentages like that, you might assume that you have to, trade options, or you're going to be gaming the market, or there's going to be some kind of tricky business going on. And so I actually just built into the copy that, you may assume that there's some tricky business going on, that you're going to have to trade options, that there's risky trading strategies. But no, this is buying and holding simple stocks. If you've ever bought and held a simple stock in your life, in your retirement account, in a brokerage account, then you can follow my method. And so we built that objection into the copy very early on because we wanted to head that off and make sure that as many people who had simply bought and sold stocks in the past were actually prone to listening, paying attention, and following through on the message that was making some pretty remarkable promises about the gains potentials for these stocks. So with that said, not everybody is writing about stocks. It makes a great example of addressing that up front, but not everybody's writing about stocks. However, there are a number of common objections that come up across markets. And this is a good reference point to just have a list to have where you consider these objections and whether they are relevant. Of course, you want to find every particular unique objection to your sales pitch, your sales promotion. And I recently in Breakthrough Marketing Secrets wrote about a process that Agora Financial has where they actually put a copywriter, once they've established their big idea, they put a copywriter in a room with a bunch of other writers and have those other copywriters start to listen to the pitch and then throw out every objection they can at that copywriter to get the copywriter to really stand behind their idea, really justify it, really bring all their proof and credibility to bear, really support that idea. And if the argument falls apart in that context, the argument is certainly going to fall apart in direct response copy. But if the copywriter is able to really start to respond to objections, they may find a few other objections that come up that suddenly feel like they should absolutely be addressed in the copy. And those are going to be specific to the pitch. And if you are able to follow a process like that with your peers who are copywriters, with other people on your team, whoever that is, that will be very useful in coming up with the specific objections for your product or service. However, like I said, there are a bunch of common objections that you may want to consider addressing. So first off, how do I know this is really for me? We talked about general versus personal objections. How do I know that this is for me as an individual? How are you able to address that? What unique benefits do you bring to the table? And listen, if you followed the high velocity copywriting process up till this point, a lot of these feel like they've been addressed throughout the copy. And there's a good reason for that. But here we're just addressing them specifically in this context so we can shine light on them so that you can get even more depth and dimension to your understanding of how to use them and how you might plug and play them, for example, in an email or in a specific part of the copy or in a sidebar or whatever you're doing. So what unique benefits do you bring to the table? What makes your product or service unique? Wow, those are big claims. How do I know they're real? Why should I trust you? How can you prove what it is that you have to offer, that you are saying, that you are promising? Yeah, but it may work for other people, but will it work for me? Is this really going to work for me? How do I know? How can I be confident? Answer that with your guarantee, maybe your risk reversal. You get to try it before you're fully committed. How is this any different than all these other things I've tried? We talked about the without list. The without list is actually a great way to address this objection. How is this any different than all these other things I've tried? State how it is, right? What makes you think I'll actually get results this time? If I tried and failed before, how am I going to get to that ideal result because of the unique aspects of your product or service? Why haven't I heard of this already? If you're presenting me with like a new opportunity or a prediction of something coming down the road, why haven't I heard of this solution? Why? Well, how come my expert never told me this? So this is, the person that you're speaking to has people of influence in their life. If it's financial, it could be their financial advisor. If it's health, it could be their doctor. How come your doctor hasn't told you about this particular supplement or diet recommendation or whatever? Why haven't I heard of this? How come my expert hasn't told me about this? Is this really that good of a deal? So you have to address the objection. If we're really stacking on the value and really trying to convey that you're getting a ton of value for very little, how can you speak to that specifically to underscore that this is really that good of a deal, that you're not just making up some arbitrary value numbers? So you have to underscore that. What if I'm not ready to act today? That's the final objection, because we want to stimulate urgent action from our prospects, from our potential buyers. What if I'm not ready to act today? How are you able to respond to that? So this is a list of common objections. It's very effective to at least have these in mind as you are going through your copy, and especially in the middle part of the copy, there, as you were really building your case, as you were building interest and desire, there is a lot of room in there for you to make sure that these objections are answered in one way, shape, or form. So once you've addressed the objections, you can look to other copy elements and a different copy element. And remember here, we're talking about plug and play. So in the previous videos and the previous lessons, we were kind of establishing a universal narrative arc of effective persuasive messages. And we're talking there especially about longer form direct response copy. These are elements that can be used in all sorts of places. This next one is Find Yourself Here, and it's a favorite of mine. It was picked up from Dan Kennedy, and the principle of it is that you probably within your business, within your marketing, within your client's business, are serving a small number of client archetypes. And these are, the 3 different types of businesses that you especially focus on. Maybe you do For example, Facebook lead generation for financial companies, for local service businesses, and for, I don't know, something else. And the idea of find yourself here is you may make some more generic general claims that apply to all of these businesses, but then you specifically create case studies, you specifically create presentations. If you're sending out a direct mail piece, and this was actually demonstrated from Dan Kennedy as a book that he sent out as an insert into the direct mail piece of like 8 different archetypes of different customers who may be a good fit for the product that he was selling. So how can you present a case study such that the different archetypes of who is a good fit for your business recognize that, oh, okay, so this person, this product or service has helped somebody like me? Because once you can do that, once you can get them over that threshold of believing that, okay, this can work for me, you have made most of the sale. So explicitly create something. It can be testimonials. It can be whatever it is. The idea is that you want your prospect to be able to find themselves in your marketing message to see directly how your product or service can benefit someone like them. A damaging omission. I love this because it instantly builds credibility. It builds proof that everything else you say is true. The vulnerability of choosing to do this in a marketing piece where you are asking people to take action on your marketing is very powerful in getting people on your side and prone to response. A damaging omission is basically where you admit that you've screwed up. And it often comes in the form of a story. It often comes in the form of admitting a mistake, admitting a downfall. To come out and say that, and then on the other side to have addressed and resolved that problem, is an incredibly effective way to get people on your side. So if you're able to do that in the form of an email story, or early on in a promotion where you're really establishing your authority, it works well with the, I wasn't always an A-list copywriter. In fact, and then you go on from there. In fact, when I talk about story selling, I often use the story of the college story writing class that I was in that was about writing modern short fiction, and how it was the first class where I got a really bad grade in writing. And basically it was because I was being trained to write like an academic, and I was being trained to write like an 18th or 19th century fiction author. And so when I use flowery language and too much detail, this teacher basically said, nobody today wants to read that junk. And I got the worst grade I'd gotten on any recent writing assignment in that class. And it was because the teacher was right. I was writing things that might have been fit for other academic classes, but nobody would really want to read. And that taught me about how to write good stories that your reader actually cares about. And that's a great damaging admission to use in the context of eventually teaching people how to sell with story. Reasons not to buy. Now, this probably goes with the without list and the what it's not list, but actually giving people reasons not to buy, if they don't feel like those reasons apply to them, only makes them more convinced that they are a perfect fit. And I still remember when I wrote a version of this for the Titans of Direct Response letter, which is actually in the line-by-line analysis in the Story Selling Masterclass. When I wrote a reasons not to buy description in there, I had somebody actually rip me off, actually swipe my copy almost word for word. And they had a new control that they'd created for their business based on that. And then they had the gall to turn around and specifically challenge me, ask me if I would do a beat the control assignment for them against my own copy. And I thought that was ridiculous. But the idea, the reasons not to buy list is saying, you are not qualified if XYZ. So, your product or service might be more expensive. And so they have to be financially qualified to buy. It might be that you're only willing to work with people who are ready to take massive action. So if they're not ready to take massive action, you only work with check writers. And so if you're not a check writer, this is not for you. In fact, one of the ways to present this is to specifically say, this is not for you if X, Y, or Z are true. And so you just list all the things that make somebody not a qualified prospect for your product or service. And if somebody gets through that, your perfect customer should be able to breeze through this list and say, okay, none of those apply to me. And once they get through that, they're even more convinced that what you have to offer is for them. An alternative way to present it is who it's not for. If you specifically want to call out people who make bad customers for you, bad prospects, then you can say this is who this is not for. And now let's get to closes, common closes. The crossroads close. This is really effective, and it's probably my go-to close. Actually, in the other video where we talked about closing the sale, where we talked about getting them to take action, this was referred to as with and without. The crossroads close is where you imagine your prospect is at a crossroads, a place where they can take two paths into their future. And one of those paths is buying your product, and it leads to the ideal result you've presented. And one of those paths leads to business as usual, which is obviously inferior in terms of it being a solution to their problem or helping them take advantage of the new opportunity or respond to the prediction that you've made. So the crossroads is where you actually put them at that moment of decision and look into the future and what happens if you take either path. And of course, the natural conclusion should be that they want to take your path. FOMO, fear of missing out, especially if there's an opportunity or a prediction of something to come. If you present what they're missing out on, and you underscore, if you don't take action today, you're not going to get this, that's an effective way to close the sale. Another way to close the sale that you probably recognize as a way to open the sale is the equivalent of the Wall Street Journal Two Young Men letter. And if you have a good story about this, about how your product or service made the difference between two people who were in roughly the same situation, this can be an effective way to close. And if you're a serious student of copywriting, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Wall Street Journal ran a hugely successful direct mail campaign that told the story of two young men from a similar Midwestern college, grew up in a similar Midwestern town, ended up working at the same Midwestern manufacturing company, but one of them was VP of the company and one was still, basically doing the same middle-level job as they had done their entire career. And what made the difference? It was the Wall Street Journal. And so you subscribe to the Wall Street Journal and you're going to become VP of your company or whatever. That story arc works just as effectively at the end when you're closing the sale as it does at the beginning. I actually told a true story once about a cat that I had growing up named Ninja. And Ninja was an indoor cat. And so we kept Ninja inside, but behind our house where we were growing up, there was a field. And so Ninja would always stare out the back door, back window, looking at this field. And I imagine just imagining all the mice that she could chase. And one day Ninja got out through the back door. And what happened, where we found her a couple hours later, was hiding under our back porch, because with the whole world available to her, she was still scared to go over the threshold into that big future that was available to her. And so, especially if you're talking about a new opportunity, to challenge someone to not be the scaredy cat. You could use a story, you could use a story much like mine if you can come up with it. To challenge someone not to be a scaredy cat, to take advantage of a new opportunity can be a really effective way to close the sale. There's a very common close from a lot of selling books, and that is the puppy dog close. The idea is you go to the pet store, you take your kids, they fall in love with a particular puppy, and the pet store owner says, listen, you don't have to decide today that you're going to adopt that puppy, but what I encourage you to do is just take the puppy home for the weekend. Enjoy the puppy's company, see how everybody does with the puppy in the house. And if you decide that that puppy is not right for you at the end of the weekend, just bring it back in. You're under no risk, no obligation. Just try. Just try. You have nothing to lose. And you know that anybody that actually says yes and takes that puppy dog home is not going to take it back in, especially because of the kids. The kids are going to have a name for it. They're going to tell all their friends about it. And that puppy is yours before Monday morning. And the idea is to give someone, to just underscore basically your guarantee that they can try it with nothing to lose, no risk or obligation. And then they decide. And by doing that, even better if you can do it in the form of some kind of trial, then you have an effective close right there. Get down to brass tacks. Depending on your positioning of the person who is the voice of your piece of copy, if they have some kind of serious background or a just tell the truth attitude, if you just close the sale by saying, let's get down to it. You have this decision in front of you. You know the best course of action is this, but you have to get off your butt and do it. Well, that's a great way to close the sale as well. One more way to close the sale is kind of the opposite side of that, and it's the warm and fuzzy final personal appeal. You might bring the person's face back on screen, either in the form of a picture, or if you've been doing slides, you might actually suddenly have a face-to-face video where the person actually says, listen, from the depths of my heart, I believe that this is the right choice for you. And I know that, you have to make your own decision, but I want you to just try it. This is my personal appeal to you. And that attitude, obviously they're two very different attitudes between get down to brass tacks and a final personal appeal. Either one, depending on the voice of the rest of the copy, can be an effective way to close the sale. All right. So those are just a number of useful copy elements that you can use and just kind of plug and play in different parts of your copy. And I wanted to just make sure I gave them to you as something that you could have in your toolbox in terms of things that can help you write better copy faster. If you have questions about this lesson, or if you'd like to rate and review and express the value that you have gotten out of it, make sure to do that using the functionality inside the player. Again, this has been the Copy Elements lesson in high velocity copywriting, and I look forward to diving into the next lesson with you here soon.